The auction hall buzzed with an energy unlike any Jackson had ever seen. Rows upon rows of alien nobles from across the galaxy sat in towering seats, their voices blending into a chaotic hum. The room reeked of power, wealth, and something far worse, desperation. Shackled and bruised, Jackson stood with a line of slaves on a raised platform, the harsh light of the arena illuminating every scar on his body. He refused to bow his head, even as the other fighters avoided eye contact with the crowd. He had survived too much to show fear now. A booming voice echoed through the hall. Next on the block, a rare specimen from Earth. A human gladiator. Strong, resourceful, and unbeaten in the pits of Zareth Prime. The crowd erupted in murmurs, curious yet skeptical. Humans were considered weak by most alien standards, their small size and lack of natural weapons often the subject of ridicule. But Jackson's reputation had spread. Earth's last gladiator, the man who had fought monsters twice his size and lived to tell the tale. "Let the bidding begin," the announcer declared, and the numbers climbed quickly. The bids were shouted in dozens of alien languages, each more aggressive than the last. Jackson's jaw tightened as he scanned the crowd. To them, he was nothing but a tool, a weapon to be used for entertainment. Then the room fell silent. The doors at the back of the hall swung open, and a figure entered. A tall, elegant woman with scales that shimmered like polished silver. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd with a sharp, commanding presence that made everyone fall quiet. She was no ordinary noble. She was Queen Cyrillith, ruler of the Dracoth Empire, and her arrival sent ripples of awe through the room. "Your Majesty," the announcer stammered, bowing deeply. What an unexpected honor. Jackson's gaze locked with hers for a brief moment. She didn't flinch like the others. Instead, her lips curled into a small, calculating smile. She raised one hand, adorned with glowing rings, and the announcer gulped. "Do I hear a bid of 50,000 credits?" the announcer asked nervously. 1,000,000 credits, Cyrillith said, her voice smooth and unshaken. Gasps filled the room. The other bidders exchanged shocked glances before quietly backing out. No one dared to challenge the Queen's authority or her wealth. The hammer fell. "Sold to Queen Cyrillith of the Dracoth Empire," the announcer declared. Jackson was unshackled and escorted to her royal guards, his mind racing. Why would a queen buy him? What did she want from a human? As he was led toward her, Cyrillith's gaze never left him. There was something unsettling about her expression, a mix of curiosity, confidence, and something far more dangerous. "Welcome to my empire, human," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that hinted at both opportunity and peril. "Your fate is now tied to mine." Jackson didn't reply. He simply stared back, determined to find out what game she was playing. Axon sat in the royal transport, his wrists still sore from the heavy shackles. The luxurious interior of the ship was a stark contrast to the filthy slave auctions he had endured for months. The seats were made of soft, alien materials that glimmered faintly under the dim lighting. Yet none of it eased the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't here to enjoy comfort. He was still a prisoner, no matter how shiny the cage. Queen Cyrillith sat across from him, studying him like a predator sizing up its prey. Her golden eyes reflected the soft glow of the cabin, and her calm demeanor only made Jackson more uneasy. She hadn't spoken a word since they left the auction, and the silence hung thick between them. "Why me?" Jackson finally broke the quiet, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "You paid more for me than most spend on an entire fleet. What do you want from a human?" Cyrillith leaned back, her silver-scaled fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest. "You're bold to question me, human. I like that," she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "But don't mistake boldness for power. You are mine now." Jackson's jaw clenched, but he held his tongue. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him rattle. "Do you know where we're going?" Cyrillith asked, her voice low and measured. "I can guess." Jackson replied. "Another arena, isn't it? You want me to fight for your entertainment." Her lips curved into a small smile. "Not for entertainment, no. For survival. The Dracoth Empire's reputation rests on dominance in the galactic arena. Our champions have always been unmatched, but recently, challengers have grown stronger. We need a new weapon, a unique one." "And you think I'm that weapon?" Jackson asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "I've seen the records of your fights, human," she said, leaning forward. "You don't just fight with strength, you fight with your mind. Strategy, creativity, adaptability. Those are your true weapons. Traits that most beings in this galaxy lack." Jackson was silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. She wasn't wrong. His victories weren't just about brute force. They were about outsmarting opponents who underestimated him. But her praise didn't make him trust her. "And what do I get out of this?" he asked, crossing his arms. Seralith's smile deepened. "Freedom. If you win the Grand Championship, I will personally release you from any bond to my empire. You'll be free to go wherever you choose." Jackson narrowed his eyes. "And if I lose?" Her gaze turned sharp, her voice cold. "Then you won't live long enough to worry about freedom." The transport landed with a gentle thud, and Seralith rose gracefully. "Your training begins now, human. Prove to me that my investment wasn't a mistake." As Jackson followed her out of the ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling him everything. But one thing was clear. He had no choice but to fight. The training grounds were nothing like Jackson had imagined. Spread across the vast expanse of an alien jungle, the facility was built into the side of a glowing cliff, surrounded by dense, bioluminescent vegetation. Strange creatures roamed the edges, their eyes gleaming like lanterns in the shadows. The air was humid, thick with the scent of alien flora. Jackson took a deep breath, trying to suppress the growing unease in his chest. Dozens of Dracoth warriors trained in the open arena ahead, their powerful frames glistening under the strange twin suns above. Their combat was fast, brutal, and efficient, each strike a perfect balance of speed and precision. They moved like predators, their clawed hands slashing through the air with deadly force. Jackson's gaze narrowed as he watched them. They were bigger, stronger, and faster than any opponent he had ever faced. Queen Seralith led him toward the center of the grounds, her regal presence commanding the attention of everyone present. The warriors immediately stopped their training and bowed deeply. Their golden eyes flickered with curiosity and disdain as they noticed Jackson trailing behind her. "This is the human you've heard of," Seralith announced, her voice carrying authority that left no room for question. "Jackson will represent the Dracoth Empire in the galactic arena." The warriors exchanged uneasy glances, some stifling smirks. A tall, scarred Dracoth stepped forward, his towering figure radiating hostility. "With all due respect, my queen, why a human? We have warriors born for battle." "Because this human has something you lack, Calyx," Seralith replied coldly, her gaze sharp. "And unless you'd like to test that theory, I suggest you fall in line." Calyx's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, his glare never leaving Jackson. The tension in the air was palpable, but Jackson remained calm. He had been in enough dangerous situations to know that showing fear would only make him a target. As the warriors returned to their training, Seralith turned to him. "Your first challenge begins now," she said, motioning toward an open circle in the center of the arena. "Prove that my trust in you wasn't misplaced." Jackson stepped into the circle, his body tense but ready. Across from him, a hulking Dracoth warrior entered, wielding a massive energy staff that hummed with power. Jackson had no weapon, no armor, just his instincts and years of experience in survival. The fight began without warning. The Dracoth lunged, his staff slamming into the ground where Jackson had been a moment earlier. Jackson rolled to the side, using his speed to dodge the powerful swings. His opponent was strong, but predictable. Each attack was a brute show of force, leaving gaps that Jackson quickly exploited. In a swift move, Jackson grabbed a fallen shard of rock and used it to strike the Dracoth's exposed flank. The warrior stumbled, and Jackson followed with a well-placed kick to his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The arena fell silent. Cyrillith smiled faintly. "You'll do." The warrior's murmurs filled the air as Jackson stepped out of the circle, his breathing steady despite the adrenaline rushing through his veins. His opponent, the hulking Dracoth, remained on the ground, groaning in defeat. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Jackson had proven that he wasn't weak, and more importantly, he wasn't afraid. Queen Cyrillith stood on the edge of the arena, her golden eyes fixed on him. A subtle smirk curved her lips, but she gave no further praise. Instead, she turned to the watching warriors. "Let this be a lesson," she announced, her voice slicing through the crowd. "Strength is not enough. The mind is what decides victory." The Dracoth warriors exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others bristled with resentment. Among them, Calyx, the scared warrior from earlier, watched Jackson with a mix of anger and disdain. His pride was clearly wounded by the sight of a human earning respect so quickly. As the crowd dispersed, Jackson approached Cyrillith, wiping dirt from his hands. "I hope that was proof enough," he said, his tone calm but firm. "For now," Cyrillith replied, her gaze still assessing him. "But don't mistake one victory for safety. You've merely survived the first step. The galactic arena is a far deadlier place than this." Before Jackson could reply, a figure approached, a Dracoth female with dark blue scales and sharp, piercing eyes. She carried a strange weapon that looked like a hybrid of a blade and a gun. "I am Veril, your trainer," she said, her voice curt. "The Queen has assigned me to prepare you for what's to come." "Great," Jackson muttered, eyeing the weapon. "Does that mean I finally get one of those?" Veril let out a low chuckle. "Not yet, human. First, you'll learn how to survive without one. If you can't, you'll never last in the arena." She motioned for him to follow, leading him toward a smaller, secluded training area. It was filled with obstacles, ranging from towering walls to pits of glowing energy. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" "Your next test," Veril said, stepping aside. "This course is designed to push your body and mind to the limit. You'll need speed, strength, and strategy to get through it." Jackson scanned the course, his muscles already aching at the thought of climbing, dodging, and sprinting through it all. But he didn't back down. "Let's get started, then." For hours, Veril pushed him relentlessly. He scaled walls with raw determination, dodged energy traps by fractions of a second, and used his wits to navigate the maze-like sections. Every failure earned him a sharp rebuke from Veril, but every success brought a flicker of approval in her eyes. By the end of the day, Jackson collapsed to the ground, drenched in sweat but alive. Veril stood over him, arms crossed. "You're tougher than you look, human. Maybe you'll survive this after all." In the distance, Cyrillith watched in silence, her expression unreadable. The next morning, Jackson woke to the sound of heavy footsteps and a sharp knock on his chamber door. He groaned, his body sore from the relentless training the day before. Every muscle protested as he swung his legs off the bed and stood up. Before he could even answer, the door slid open, and Veril entered, her expression as sharp as ever. "Get up, human," she barked. "Your real test starts now." Jackson sighed but followed her without argument. She led him back to the training grounds, where Queen Cyrillith and a small group of Dracoth nobles stood watching. Their presence sent a ripple of unease through him. This wasn't just another training exercise. Something bigger was about to happen. As they reached the center of the arena, Jackson noticed a tall, armored Dracoth warrior waiting for him. It was Calyx, the scared warrior who had been glaring at him since his arrival. Calyx grinned, baring sharp teeth, and slammed his fist into his chest in a display of challenge. "Today, you fight me," Calyx announced, his deep voice echoing across the arena. "No tricks, no running, just strength against strength." Jackson raised an eyebrow. And what if I don't want to fight you? Calyx chuckled darkly. Then you can kneel and admit you don't belong here. Jackson clenched his fists, the insult sparking something deep within him. He glanced at Serylith, but she gave no indication of stopping the challenge. Her golden eyes watched him closely, as if this fight was another test of his worth. Fine, Jackson said, stepping forward. But don't cry when I beat you. The crowd of warriors erupted in laughter, some cheering for Calyx, others curious to see if Jackson could actually hold his own. The two opponents squared off, and the tension in the air grew thick. Calyx attacked first, charging at Jackson with the ferocity of a beast. His movements were fast for someone so large, but Jackson had spent years fighting opponents like him. He dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding Calyx's powerful swing, and countered with a quick jab to his ribs. The strike barely fazed Calyx, who retaliated with a massive punch. Jackson ducked, using his smaller size to stay out of reach. It was a game of endurance. Calyx's brute strength against Jackson's speed and strategy. As the fight dragged on, Jackson began to notice patterns in Calyx's movements. Every time the Dracoth swung wide, he left his side open. Using this weakness, Jackson landed a series of precise strikes, chipping away at Calyx's defenses. Finally, Calyx overextended himself, and Jackson seized the opportunity. He slid under the larger warrior's arm and swept his legs out from under him. Calyx crashed to the ground, stunned, and the crowd fell silent. Jackson stood over him, breathing hard but victorious. "Guess I belong here after all," he said, his voice steady. Serylith's faint smile returned. "You're learning, human." The days after his victory over Calyx were tense. While some of the Dracoth warriors grudgingly respected Jackson, others still considered him an outsider, a human who didn't belong in their world of strength and honor. But Jackson didn't care about their opinions. He was here to survive, and nothing was going to stop him from fighting for his freedom. Queen Serylith was quieter than usual, her gaze often lingering on him from across the training grounds. He could tell she was impressed, but there was something more in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. One evening, as Jackson rested in his quarters, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find Serylith standing in the hallway, her expression unreadable. She was alone, no guards, no attendants. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Jackson nodded, stepping aside. As she entered, he couldn't help but notice how much her presence seemed to fill the room. There was power in her every movement, yet a strange vulnerability hidden beneath the surface. "I wanted to speak with you, human," she began, her golden eyes locking with his. "About the future, about the arena." Jackson leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "What about it?" "I've been watching you," Serylith said, her voice steady, but carrying an edge of something darker. "You've proven yourself time and time again, but the competition in the galactic arena is unlike anything you faced. It's not just about fighting. It's about strategy, mind games, survival. The stakes are higher than you can imagine." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "So, what's your point? You think I'm not ready?" She shook her head. "No, not at all. But there are those in my court who want you to fail. They see your rise as a threat to their power. They'll do anything to stop you." A chill ran down Jackson's spine. He had always known that Serylith's world was full of intrigue and danger, but hearing it from her made it real. "So what do we do about it?" Serylith took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I need you to trust me, Jackson. There are enemies in my ranks, and they'll stop at nothing to see you fail. If they succeed, it will be the end of both your life and my rule." Jackson stared at her, processing the weight of her words. He had come here for freedom, but now it seemed like he was caught in a web much bigger than he had realized. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice flat. "You're the one who bought me." Serylith didn't flinch at his words. "Because I have no one else. Because I see something in you, something I don't see in my people. and because I've already lost too much to let this empire crumble." There was a long pause between them, the tension palpable. Jackson could feel the intensity in the air, the way her eyes never left his. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll trust you. But if I'm going to fight for you, you'd better start showing me your cards. No more games." Cyrilith's lips curled into a small, approving smile. "Agreed." As she left his quarters, Jackson couldn't help but wonder just what he had gotten himself into. But one thing was certain. This was no longer just about winning in the arena. It was about survival, both his and Cyrilith's. The tension in the air was unbearable as the day of the championship approached. Jackson had spent the last few weeks preparing, but no amount of training could truly prepare him for what awaited him in the galactic arena. He had faced many tough battles, but this was something else entirely. This was for everything. Cyrilith had kept her word, offering him insight into the inner workings of the arena. It wasn't just about strength. It was about reading the crowd, manipulating the game, and using the environment to his advantage. Every competitor had their own tactics, their own weaknesses, and Jackson was determined to find them all. But with every passing day, the stakes grew higher. Cyrilith's enemies in the court had grown bolder, and Jackson could feel their eyes on him. He had been forced into alliances he didn't trust, each one a fragile thread holding him together in this vast web of deception. The night before the championship, Jackson found himself alone in his quarters. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through his hair as the weight of everything settled on him. The arena would be filled with bloodthirsty spectators, each cheering for death, each wanting to see him fail. And somewhere in the shadows, Cyrilith's rivals would be waiting for him to stumble. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Jackson rose, wary but curious. When he opened it, he was surprised to see Cyrilith standing there, her face unreadable. "Are you ready?" she asked softly, her golden eyes intense. "I'm ready," Jackson replied, though doubt still lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. He just didn't know what. Cyrilith stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Tomorrow is more than just a fight," she said, her voice low. "This is your chance to change everything, to prove to the galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated." Jackson nodded, understanding the weight of her words, but the stakes felt even bigger now. This wasn't just about survival, it was about the future. The future of Cyrilith's empire, his freedom, and the fate of everyone caught in the middle. "I won't let you down," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see if he truly meant it. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. The touch was unexpected, but it wasn't unwelcome. "I believe in you," she said quietly. "But remember this, win or lose, you have already changed everything. You've already proven your worth." Jackson met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the universe that humans were capable of more than anyone had ever believed. The silence between them stretched for a moment before Cyrilith turned to leave. "Tomorrow, Jackson. Tomorrow, we both fight for our future." As she walked away, Jackson stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The arena, the battles, and the treacherous politics swirling around him. It was all about to collide. But no matter what happened, Jackson was ready to face it head-on. The day of the championship had arrived, and the arena buzzed with anticipation. The massive structure, visible from miles away, was packed with spectators from across the galaxy, their eyes focused on the grand event unfolding before them. Jackson could feel the weight of the moment as he stood in the preparation chambers beneath the arena, the sounds of the crowd rising like a tidal wave above him. This was it, the culmination of everything he had fought for. The chance to prove himself, not just to Cyrilith or the Dracoth Empire, but to the entire galaxy. But beneath the excitement, a knot of unease twisted in his stomach. There was no turning back now. Cyrilith had visited him earlier, her usual cool demeanor replaced with a flicker of something deeper, something almost vulnerable. She had wished him luck, though the words felt unnecessary. Jackson knew she was more concerned than she let on. Her empire's future, his future, and their futures had all become intertwined. The door to the chamber opened, and Jackson was led into the arena. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices reverberating through the walls. The bright lights of the arena nearly blinded him as he stepped out into the center, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the massive gladiators standing across from him, their bodies rippling with muscle, weapons gleaming in the harsh light. He was small compared to them, but he had something they didn't: an edge, a quick mind, and the ability to think on his feet. That had kept him alive this long. It would have to be enough. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Welcome to the final match of the Galactic Championship. The human gladiator, Jackson, faces his most dangerous opponent yet." The crowd roared in approval as Jackson's opponent, a towering armored warrior, stepped forward. The alien was nearly twice Jackson's size, his eyes glowing with malice as he gripped his massive energy axe. The weapon crackled with energy, ready to strike. Jackson didn't wait for the signal. He darted forward, using the environment to his advantage. The arena was a massive structure filled with obstacles, pillars, walls, and platforms that offered opportunities to hide, jump, or trap an opponent. He needed to move quickly, outsmarting the beast before it could land a single blow. His opponent swung the axe down with terrifying force, but Jackson was already rolling to the side. He landed on his feet and immediately began circling, looking for an opening. The alien warrior growled, clearly frustrated by Jackson's agility. The fight was brutal. Jackson darted in and out, landing quick strikes to the warrior's vulnerable points, but each attack seemed to have little effect on the heavily armored beast. The crowd was going wild, their cheers deafening as they watched the battle unfold. Jackson's mind raced. He needed a plan. The warrior's movements were slow but powerful, and he couldn't keep dodging forever. He spotted a weak spot, a gap in the armor on the warrior's shoulder. It was small, but it was the only chance he had. Taking a deep breath, Jackson sprinted forward, timing his move perfectly. With a swift, calculated strike, he jabbed his knife into the exposed gap. The warrior howled in pain, his axe wavering for just a second. That was all Jackson needed. He twisted, using the momentum to knock the axe from the warrior's grip. In one final move, he tackled the beast to the ground, pinning him with all the strength he had left. The arena fell silent. Jackson stood over the fallen warrior, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The crowd erupted into cheers, their roars deafening as they witnessed the impossible. Jackson had won. As the announcer declared him the victor, he glanced up at Sarilith, who stood in the royal box, her gaze fixed on him. She didn't smile, but there was something in her eyes, something that told him he had just changed everything. Jackson stood victorious in the center of the arena, the cheers of the crowd ringing in his ears like a distant storm. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his body aching from the grueling fight. The alien warrior lay at his feet, defeated and unmoving, but Jackson barely registered the sight. His mind was still spinning from the chaos of the battle. He had done it. He had survived. Above him, in the royal box, Sarilith watched silently, her expression unreadable. Jackson's heart skipped a beat when he caught her gaze. Her golden eyes locked with his, and for a moment, it felt like the entire galaxy had faded away. There was something more between them now. The tension, the unspoken bond, it was undeniable. The announcer's voice broke through the silence. And there you have it. The human gladiator, Jackson, has emerged victorious. The Galactic Championship is his. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Jackson barely heard them. All that mattered was the look in Sarilith's eyes. She had promised him freedom if he won, but now that the moment had arrived, he wasn't sure what to make of it. What did it mean for him to be free? What did it mean for them? Jackson's legs felt like jelly as he stumbled off the arena floor. His mind was still reeling, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The Empire's future, Serelith's future, depended on what happened next. As he made his way back to the royal chambers, he was met by Veril, who looked at him with a mix of respect and wariness. "You did it, human," she said, her voice low. "But don't think it's over. There are still enemies waiting in the shadows." "I know," Jackson replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I'll be ready." Veril nodded, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "Don't underestimate the dangers ahead. You may have won the battle, but the war is far from over." Jackson didn't respond. He was too tired to argue, and he knew she was right. The victory in the arena had been just one part of a much larger struggle. The political forces within the Empire would not let Serelith's rise go unchallenged. There were enemies who would stop at nothing to bring her down. And now he was in the middle of it all. When Jackson finally reached his chambers, he found Serelith waiting for him. She stood by the window, her back to him, looking out at the stars. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It felt like the calm before the storm. "Jackson," Serelith finally said, her voice soft but firm. "You've done more than win an arena battle. You've given me hope for the future of this empire." Jackson stepped closer, his heart pounding. "And what now?" Serelith turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. "Now we take back what's ours. We build something stronger, together." For the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, Jackson felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about them. About changing the course of an empire. And about something more than just fighting for freedom. It was about fighting for a future that had never seemed possible before. He nodded, a sense of resolve settling in his chest. Together, the days after the championship win were a blur. Jackson could hardly remember the celebrations, the endless ceremonies, or the praises from the galaxy's most powerful figures. All he could focus on now was the task at hand, ensuring Serelith's empire remained intact. The fight for freedom had taken on a new form. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revolution. Serelith had kept her promise. He was free. But freedom, as Jackson had learned, came with new burdens. The political factions within the empire were restless. They had never truly accepted Serelith's rule, and now they had a new reason to fear her. Jackson stood in the war room, looking out over the vast city that stretched below him. Serelith's empire was sprawling and powerful, but it was also fractured. The nobles and military leaders who had once supported her were now divided. Some had pledged loyalty to him after the arena victory, but others still viewed him as an outsider, a threat to their power. "I can feel the tension in the air," Jackson said, turning to Serelith, who stood beside him, her regal posture unwavering. "How long until they make their move?" "Not long," Serelith replied, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything she had fought for. "They'll try to take me down, and they'll use you as the excuse." Jackson nodded, his fists clenching at his sides. He had known this would come. They were playing a dangerous game, and every move had consequences. "There's a way to win," Jackson said, his voice steady. "We don't have to play by their rules." Serelith raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jackson smiled, a plan forming in his mind. "You're the queen, Serelith. You've already won the arena, but the true battle is in the minds of the people. We need to show them that we're stronger than they think. We need to take control of their narrative." Serelith looked at him, her eyes narrowing in thought. "You're suggesting we create a movement, a symbol?" "Yes," Jackson replied. "We'll use my victory in the arena as the rallying point. The people already know me. They've seen what I can do. Now we need to make sure they see you not just as a ruler, but as someone who can change everything." Serelith was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then she nodded. "You're right, but we'll need more than just a symbol. We need support from the people, from the warriors, from the entire empire." Jackson's smile widened. We'll build that support, one step at a time. We'll show them that the future isn't about bloodshed and power. It's about unity. It wasn't going to be easy. They would face countless challenges, and the enemies in Cyrilith's court would not give up easily. But Jackson was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just fighting for his own freedom anymore. He was fighting for Cyrilith, for the Empire, and for a future where the galaxy would no longer be ruled by fear. As he looked at Cyrilith, a sense of determination filled him. Together, they could change the galaxy. Together, they would be unstoppable. And that, Jackson realized, was what true freedom really meant.